It's hell to move from park to park. It seems like every single time you get to your tent or get your camp set up and start getting things livable again, it's time to move again. They have made it impossible to feel human just because we're homeless. Like, we're not supposed to exist. We get a ticket just for trying to live.
America's homeless crisis is worsening once again. In the wake of COVID, housing costs surged, unemployment spiked, and by 2024, nearly 800,000 Americans were without a home. To walk past someone in that condition, you almost have to shut down a piece of your own humanity. For those living it, each day is consumed by the basics: where to find food, where to rest, where to simply feel safe for a few hours. What most people don't realize is that homelessness doesn't just carry a human toll, it carries a financial one. Every tent on a street corner, every person sleeping on a park bench represents hidden costs that taxpayers are already paying. And it's that invisible price tag that leads us to a deeper, more uncomfortable truth: what cities are really spending to manage or mismanage this crisis.
We're gonna be all right, sissy. We're gonna be all right.
I'm scared.
Don't worry about it. We'll be all right. It's gonna work out.
Across America, cities are bleeding money in their fight against homelessness, yet with little real progress to show for it. In 2024, New York City spent a record-breaking $4 billion on homeless services, the highest in its history. California, facing its own spiraling crisis, pledged $4.8 billion over the next 2 years. But despite these massive investments, progress remains painfully slow. Since 2007, homelessness nationwide has fallen by only 10%. Even more troubling, individual homelessness, adults living without family, has barely budged, declining by just 1%. And in 2024, years of hard-won progress collapsed with a devastating 35% surge in unsheltered homelessness, erasing the fragile gains made since 2019. So what exactly is going wrong? Year after year, politicians promise that homelessness is their top priority. Budgets swell. New programs are launched. Headlines declare that solutions are on the way. And yet, tents continue to multiply under freeway overpasses. Shelters remain overwhelmed. Public frustration grows as tax dollars appear to vanish into systems that don't deliver. In San Francisco, Los Angeles, Portland, and even in smaller metros like Sacramento and Denver, local leaders are under fire. Residents watch their neighborhoods transform before their eyes. Dog parks turned into encampments, sidewalks lined with tarps. And the most basic question only grows louder. If we're spending this much, why isn't it getting better? Is it really a matter of money, or are we missing the mark entirely in how we define and respond to homelessness? That question takes us to the next step. Not just how much we're spending, but who exactly is being left behind. Homelessness doesn't fall like random misfortune. It targets the vulnerable, the overlooked, and the unsupported. In 2020, more than 120,000 people experiencing homelessness in the United States were also battling severe mental illness. Another 98,000 struggled with chronic substance abuse. These aren't just statistics, they're deeply human stories, where trauma piles upon trauma. For many, the cycle is almost impossible to escape. Without stable shelter, managing mental health becomes nearly unmanageable. Medication schedules are broken, therapy is out of reach, and people in recovery from addiction often find themselves back on the streets, surrounded by the very triggers they're desperate to avoid. And the problem doesn't stop there. Veterans, young people aging out of foster care, LGBTQ+ individuals rejected by their families, and formerly incarcerated people trying to re-enter society all face disproportionate risks of homelessness. These groups aren't failing the system. Far too often, the system is failing them. There is also the hidden homelessness that statistics rarely capture. Families living out of cars, single mothers cycling through motels, teenagers couch, surfing from one unstable home to another. They may not always appear in point-in-time counts, but they're every bit a part of the crisis. As viewers of this travel documentary, it's crucial to challenge the narrow image of homelessness as just the man on the corner holding a cardboard sign. The reality is broader, more complex, and far more personal than many of us realize. So how do we begin to chart a path out of such deep systemic failure? The answer might begin with housing, but not just any housing. What if we gave people a home first and let everything else follow? For decades, America followed a housing-ready approach. People experiencing homelessness had to prove they were worthy of housing. Get sober first, finish treatment, land a job. Only then, maybe, would they qualify for a roof over their heads. In the early 1990 seconds, psychiatrist Dr. Sam Semberis turned that model upside down. He pioneered what became the Housing First Initiative, built on a simple but powerful belief. Permanent housing is not a reward for good behavior, it's the foundation for stability. The idea was radical. Give people housing immediately, with no strings attached, no requirements for sobriety, employment, or therapy. Just a key, a door, and a safe place to call their own. Critics dismissed it as unrealistic, but when tested, it worked. Housing First rests on two core principles. First, housing itself is the most effective solution to homelessness. Second, it must be provided without preconditions. Once the chaos of street life is removed, people are far more likely to seek treatment, access support, and begin rebuilding their lives. As one participant put it, when I was housed, I could finally focus. I could finally breathe. Then I wanted help. Then I wanted a job. And this isn't just theory. Housing First has been studied for decades. In 2004, a landmark study found that 79% of participants remained stably housed after 6 months. Another study in 2000 showed Housing First programs far outpacing traditional treatment first models, with 88% housing retention compared to just 47%. The approach gained traction nationally during the George W. Bush administration, and later won support from both the Obama and Biden administrations. Federal agencies like HUD and the U.S. Interagency Council on Homelessness threw their weight behind it, while cities from New York to Salt Lake City began testing the model at scale. The results, in many cases, remarkable. Fewer emergency room visits, fewer nights in jail, and most importantly, real stories of transformation. Take Shannon McGee. After losing his mother, his family home, and eventually his footing in life, he spent 4 years on the street. Then he was connected to pathways to housing. Once housed, everything shifted. He re-enrolled in school, found work, and began to heal. His story echoes thousands more across the country. It's stories like these that show what's possible when we lead with compassion and structure. But the question remains, can Housing First solve the crisis on its own? That's where we turn next, because no matter how promising the model may be, there's always more beneath the surface. Housing First begins with shelter, but its true power lies in what comes after. The philosophy isn't just give someone a place to sleep, it's give them a stable foundation, then provide the tools to rebuild. That's where supportive services step in. Once individuals are housed, they're connected to wraparound care. Case managers, social workers, nurses, psychiatrists, and even peer advocates who've experienced homelessness themselves. These teams help clients secure IDs, schedule medical visits, navigate mental health care, find jobs, or even return to school. The impact can be transformative. Many people experiencing homelessness carry years, sometimes decades, of trauma. These are not simply people who ran out of rent money. They are survivors of abusive homes, failed institutions, untreated illnesses, and generational poverty. Once housed, they need more than just four walls and a roof. They need healing, guidance, and a system that finally works for them rather than against them. Take the example of a woman who put it simply, being housed meant I didn't have to steal food anymore. I didn't have to do things I hated just to survive. Once I had housing, I could finally make different choices. Supportive services help turn those choices into lasting change. When delivered consistently, they lower hospital visits, reduce jail time, and cut relapse rates, saving cities money in the process. A comprehensive 2015 study found that public costs dropped significantly when people were housed through Housing First, largely because emergency services were used far less. But even the best services can't succeed in isolation. That leads to the next big question. How much does all this actually cost? And is it worth it? Critics of Housing First often claim the model is too costly. Providing long-term supportive housing, staffing full-time service teams, and subsidizing rent isn't cheap, and they're right. It comes with a price tag. But so does doing nothing. Leaving someone unhoused can cost taxpayers between $50,000 and $100,000 a year. That figure includes ER visits, ambulance rides, police encounters, court fees, and jail time, none of which solve the underlying problem. Add in shelter expenses, emergency food programs, and the toll on public spaces, and the cost of homelessness grows even larger. Supporters argue that while permanent housing requires upfront investment, it pays off over time, financially and morally. People who are housed are less likely to use emergency services, more likely to stabilize their health, and far more likely to seek employment. Some studies even show that cities can break even or save money by investing in housing programs, depending on the population served. Still, the debate isn't settled. A 2018 National Academies of Sciences report concluded that while Housing First improves housing stability, it hasn't consistently proven to boost physical health outcomes or reduce healthcare costs across the board. Others caution that subsidizing housing indefinitely could overwhelm government budgets, especially in high-cost urban markets. So, Who's right? The truth likely lies somewhere in the middle. Housing First won't save every city millions overnight. But for the most vulnerable, the chronically homeless, those with serious illnesses, it's not just effective, it's efficient. Yet critics insist housing alone isn't enough, which leads to one of the most contentious questions in homelessness policy. Should treatment come first? Despite its many success stories, Housing First has come under growing criticism in recent years. Skeptics argue that the model puts too much emphasis on housing while neglecting equally urgent needs, especially addiction treatment and mental health care. Stephen Ide of the Manhattan Institute raises a central concern. If the public is told Housing First will end homelessness, then why aren't visible numbers falling in major cities? Encampments still line sidewalks. In some neighborhoods, residents say they see more people outside than ever before. Are we measuring success only by the number of people placed in housing, or by how homelessness looks and feels on the ground? Another critique centers on incentives. Some worry that offering free housing with no strings attached, no requirement for sobriety or treatment, may reduce motivation to seek help. To these critics, the risk is that Housing First could enable continued dysfunction instead of driving meaningful change. Then there's the issue of scalability. Even if Housing First works well in pilot programs, can it be expanded nationwide? Do we have enough affordable housing stock, enough trained case managers, enough long-term funding to sustain it? During the Trump administration, officials signaled a sharp turn away from Housing First, floating what they called a Housing Fourth model, where treatment, sobriety, and employment came before permanent housing. It was a deeply ideological shift, one that placed the burden back on individuals rather than on the systems that had failed them. Dr. Sam Semberis, the founder of Housing First, pushes back hard. Critics want to shift the narrative back to personal responsibility, he said. They want to make it about failure, not support. But that misses the point. People can't recover when they're living in fear, hunger, and instability. So where does that leave us? The debate is far from settled, and in the middle of it all sits a deeper question. What kind of system do we want to build, and who do we want it to serve? As we move into the final part of this travel documentary, we'll explore what real solutions could look like if we dared to invest deeply and act boldly. For all the debate and data, one truth is undeniable. Homelessness is not inevitable. It is a policy failure, not a law of nature. And like any failure, it can be fixed if we have the courage to act. The Biden administration has taken steps in that direction. The 2021 American Rescue Plan set aside $350 billion in recovery funds, including dedicated support for affordable housing and homelessness programs. It also created 70,000 emergency housing vouchers, a lifeline for many who would otherwise be left on the streets. But it is still far from enough. Solving homelessness on a national scale will require investments that match the scale of the crisis. Cities need thousands more affordable housing units, stronger tenant protections, and far greater access to mental health care. Social workers and service providers need fair wages, and nonprofits need stable, long-term funding, not grants that dry up after a year. And perhaps most important of all, the public narrative needs to change. We must move away from punishment and stigma and towards support, dignity, and the recognition that housing is a human right. In our travels across America for this episode, we've witnessed this crisis in every corner, from the subway tunnels of New York City to the sun-baked streets of Phoenix. We've spoken with veterans, single parents, teenagers, and elders, each of them caught in a system too fragile to catch them when they fall. This is why travel documentary storytelling matters. It doesn't just reveal the beauty of a place, it reveals the truth of its people. And it compels us to ask hard questions. Why are we okay with this? Why do we tolerate mass homelessness in the wealthiest nation on earth? And most importantly, what are we willing to do to change it? If you've made it this far into the video, we want to hear from you. What do you believe the solution should be? Which policies should we fight for together? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you believe stories like this matter, help us keep telling them. Please like, share, and subscribe. With your support, we can keep amplifying the voices of those too often ignored and remind the world that behind every statistic is a human story worth telling. Ending homelessness isn't about charity, it's about justice. It's about building a society where no one has to sleep on concrete, beg for food, or fear the night. Housing First may not be perfect, but it is profoundly human. It begins with dignity, and maybe that's exactly where we need to begin. The evidence is there, the stories are there, the need is urgent, we know how to do this. What's missing isn't strategy, it's scale. And what's missing from scale is the political will to act. But there is hope. With every tent replaced by a key, with every story like Shannon's, with every life restarted in a room with a locked door and a light switch, progress begins. And from there, it can spread. Because when we stop treating homelessness as background noise and start confronting it as the national emergency, it truly is. That's when change will come. Not overnight, not easily, but undeniably and realistically. After all, if we can spend billions to send rockets into space, surely we can summon the will to bring our own citizens home.